Hello, my name is Mike and this is the home of Guns and Horsepower. Thanks for joining me for today's video where I'm going to discuss what it costs to own and daily drive my 2010 Porsche Panamera S. Alright, well, a few weeks ago the oil service light came on and it made me realize this has been my third oil change, which means my third year of ownership. So I got to thinking, how much have I spent on this car over those 3 years? I've done some maintenance, I've done some modifications, and I've had to repair a couple things. And how much have I really spent? So I started making a list of all the things I've done to it. I'll start off with the modifications. The very first thing I'd done, one of the very first things, was a BMC air filter. And I went ahead and changed that myself. It's pretty difficult. You have to remove the whole front bumper. The air filter is inside here. I don't know if you can see these tubes. They feed right into it, so it's in a big long panel. It wasn't necessary, but I was trying to get more performance out of it, so that was $150. And then the car just didn't have that nice V8 sound when I got it. So I had the stock mufflers removed. I replaced those with some MagnaFlow mufflers and some new tips. That was a total of $765. So the modifications came to $915 total, which wasn't necessary, but hey, I spent it on the car. And then also I needed to buy a scan tool to go along with it, a Porsche specific scan tool, so I could reset the service intervals and service lights as they came up. That was $150. And now on to the maintenance items. I made a list here. The first thing I had to do, believe it or not, was the brakes. When I first bought the car, the dealership I'd gotten it from had changed the front pads. And after a few months, the brakes started squeaking, and they started squeaking more and more and more. It got really bad. So I went ahead and took the wheel off and investigated and noticed that, yeah, they changed the pads, but they put it onto the old rotors. So the rotors had that ridge, that rim all the way around worn into it that the new pads just didn't fit into, so they squeaked a lot. And then also I noticed that someone, the tech, whoever put them in, had put like a high temp copper grease on the back of the pads, in between the pads and that metal shim. And that grease had bled to the front and I believe contaminated the pads and caused them to crack. Go ahead and show you a clip of that here. I still kept the pads because I was shocked to see how bad they were. So these are the front pads. I don't know if you can see it here, but you can see some of the copper material. It's kind of around there. You can see the discoloration. Well, that's the copper grease that heated up and got soaked into the pads. And if you can notice here, the pads are darker. That's where the grease is soaked in. And as you can see, they cracked. Like right here, we almost have a whole chunk. All of them are like that. All 4 front pads were cracked. So for then, I definitely had to go through with changing the front brakes with my aftermarket temporary setup. So after that, I discovered that I had to get a quick replacement. The back brakes were still original. They had about 15% left, so I didn't need to change them. And I didn't want to do the fronts and then have the backs later, so I decided to look for a cheap aftermarket substitute to fill in the gap. And I found some, definitely cheap, but I got them on. They work great, took care of the squeaking. And my plan is to when those need to be replaced, or when the backs go, whichever comes first, I'm going to replace all 4 corners with OEM Porsche parts. So that's my plans. So the very first thing was brakes. That was $230. And about 6 months after that, it had a misfire and threw a code. Well, thankfully I had the code scanner, so I was able to diagnose that. Had a misfire on cylinder number 3. I checked the owner's manual service intervals, and noticed that it's about time for the spark plugs to be changed. So I went ahead and ordered spark plugs and all new ignition coils, because I didn't want to have to do the job and then find out a coil was bad too. And then also the coil screws, like most fasteners on a Porsche, are one-time use only. So I went ahead and ordered all 8 coils, the coil screws, and spark plugs on the internet, and that was for a total of $380 as well. Not too bad. The coils are only about $35 a piece, but you got to get 8 of them, so it adds up. But that job wasn't too bad. Got that done. Haven't had any problems. One time the dealership gave me a complimentary inspection, so I went ahead and took it in there, and they said it was due for the brake fluid to be changed. So since I had it there at the dealership, I went ahead and had that done. That was $250. I could have saved a lot of money doing it myself, but since it was there at the dealership and that got all my service up to date, I went ahead and just had it done there and took care of that. And then over those 3 years, I've had the 3 oil changes. The parts for that have added up to about $210. And then extra oil for those 3 years, about $50. And the extra oil is, most European vehicles, especially the V8s, they burn oil, and it's normal. The manual for this says a quart about every 1,600 miles is pretty normal. I go about half a quart every 1,600 to 2,000 miles, somewhere in there. So extra oil is definitely going to be needed. So for all those maintenance parts that are definitely necessary to keep the vehicle running and safe, that comes out to $1,090 on parts only. Now if you were going to take that to the dealer, you can double or triple that for labor. But a lot of this stuff is pretty straightforward. Brakes, spark plugs on this, it's not different than an older car. It's pretty simple. Some of the stuff is a little harder to get to. There's covers to remove, stuff like that. A few extra steps, but it's not too bad. And then during those 3 years, I had to change tires. Of course, I'm pretty hard on tires, and the car had a set of Pirelli P0s on it, so pretty high performance summer tire that goes pretty quickly. They don't have a long service life. So I went ahead and replaced them with a set of Michelin Pilot Cup tires, Sport Cup I believe they are. Those were $1,200 for the set of tires installed. Of course, you can go cheaper, get a set of tires for about $800. But I like to drive it, so I like some stickier tires on there. So total for the maintenance with the tires for the 3 years, we're looking at $2,290. So that's not too bad. Granted, some of those, like the brakes and the plugs and the coils, you're not going to have to touch for a while. You're good for a few extra years. So the next 3 years of ownership, as long as nothing else goes wrong, should be a lot cheaper. So total I've spent on the car with the maintenance, the mods, and the scan tool was $3,355 over 3 years. And like I said, a lot of that is one time, like the mods, the scan tool. I'm not going to spend that again. So hopefully the next 3 years of ownership should be a lot cheaper. And as for the 3 years and daily driving the car, it's fantastic. It's a great car to drive. It's smooth when you want it to be. You have the buttons to change the Sport and Sport Plus. You have buttons to stiffen up the suspension when you want to hit a corner hard. So you can drive it any way you want it. Like I said, the mileage is okay. It's not horrible, but it's okay. Can't really complain. You got to get premium, so it's a little extra cost there. Definitely thought it would cost more. I thought the car would be more finicky. But no, it's been great. Mechanically, it's been fantastic. It's been a joy to drive. It handles fantastic. I've taken it to autocross day. It did phenomenal. It hung with Ferrari. Was a 438. Very similar lap times, believe it or not. So yes, I've been very happy with the car. I daily drive it. I pick my kids up from school, take them to baseball practice, go to work in it, go shopping in it. It's great. It's a big car, a little hard to park sometimes in smaller spots. I kind of have to pick my spots, but other than that, no complaints. Things been fantastic. I guess next up I should mention a couple things that I've had to fix. Alright, now I'm going to mention the things that I've had to repair. And believe it or not, it's only been a couple things. There's been literally just 2, and they've been in the interior. And it's all been on the driver's side door. So right up here, when I first had it, I started developing after I put about maybe 15,000 miles on it. Had a couple little rattles coming from this area. So I don't know if you can see it right here. All I did was get like a little piece of rubber and cut like a wedge. And I just wedged it in there. And there's another one right in here on the dash. You can barely see them there. It's hard to see because they're black. And it blends in with the black leather. You can zoom in there. There you go. So they don't look the best, but they're barely noticeable. and they took care of the rattles, no problem. Other issue I had with it was down here. These little guys down here, I don't know if you can see it, these little chrome pieces, they like clip into the switch, and this one here had popped off and the clip was kind of broken a little, so I just super glued it. As you can see here, this one's missing. Same thing happened about a year later. As you can see, they just some part of it that holds it comes loose. I think it's part of this clip here. Yeah, this part here is loose here, so that's why this one came out. So I just need to get some super glue and repair that. Other than that, I think the front hood struts are getting a little weak. It's going to be time to replace those. But believe it or not, those are the only two fixes. And they didn't cost a thing. Alright, well that about sums up all the money that I've spent on the car basically in the last 3 years to keep it running. In my opinion, maintenance on a Porsche really isn't nothing more than another car. You know, a lot of the required service is just an inspection of the systems to make sure nothing is broken or needs to be replaced. You know, other than fluids, filters, and brakes, it's pretty much the same maintenance in any car. As for the ownership of it, it's been fantastic. It's a great car to drive. By the way, the suspension, it's an air ride suspension. It handles fantastic. It's smooth. It's responsive. I mean, it's really like no other car I've ever owned or ever driven. So I guess the expenses can be a little higher than in a normal car, but it's definitely worth it. Like I said, I'm at about $2,300 in total maintenance. That's including a set of tires. Once again, that's parts and supplies only. I do all the labor, so if you were to pay for labor, it's definitely going to cost a lot more, so that's something to consider. Future maintenance, looks like I'm getting close to probably needing to change all 4 corners of brakes. I've researched it out. It's about $700 for all the parts. That's pads, rotors, and wear sensors, all OEM Porsche quality. So that's going to be coming up next, and that should take me at least for another 10 years. I should have my brake situation taken care of. But that's about it as far as the maintenance goes. It's been a great car to own. It's been a fantastic car to drive. If I had to do it over again, I definitely would. I'd definitely make the purchase again. And like I said, some of those numbers seem kind of high, but a lot of those parts I'm not going to be replacing for a long time. So I imagine after I do this next brake job, the car should be set for many years to come. Alright, well I hope you found this video useful and informative. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and please browse the channel and subscribe. Thanks again.